Hey everybody, welcome back to the Living Masters podcast. My name is Zach Hankinson, and today we have episode number 3, joined by Jacob Hankinson. We talk through a whole bunch of different exciting art topics, get to know their philosophy, get to know how they came up in the art world, and see where they're going. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. Stick around, enjoy it. It's going to be a good one. Without further ado, Jacob Hankinson. Jacob, how are you going?
Wonderful, thank you.
Awesome. I'm very, very glad that you could join me here today. I think I've followed your account for quite a long time now. How about we just start from the beginning? You know, what got you into art and what brought you to this point here? I'd love to hear about it.
So I've always drawn since I was a child.
Yeah.
I would say that's probably pretty common for people who become artists. Like some of my very first and most vivid memories are of drawing. And I was, fairly serious about it. I was always known as the artist among my friends and classmates. But I sort of never thought that I would be able to do anything with it career-wise, simply because, I come from a pretty blue-collar family. No one in my family has ever been a professional artist or done anything art-related more than just a hobby. So after I graduated from high school, I sort of just went to community college and worked odd jobs. And it was actually several years until I started to try to do something with my artwork. I actually stopped drawing for probably about 2 years, like not really picking up a pencil ever. And then I realized that I wanted to draw. And so I started self-teaching through reading books and watching videos and trying to copy, from old masters and modern masters. And I was really fortunate in that I was able to rent a very tiny, very cheap space in a shared art studio and dedicate all of the time that I didn't spend working, because at that time I worked at a law firm as like a sort of a secretary. And I was able to spend all of my extra time drawing and devoted to that. And then I started teaching classes before I went to art school. And after, I think it was a year and a half of self-study, I applied to art school and I went to the Academy of Art in San Francisco.
Wow. Nice. So did you started teaching before you went to the art school, or was
Yes.
that? Yeah. Right.
So there was a small art gallery in my hometown, and it had a little room to the side of the main gallery that had space for maybe 6 people. And the gallery owners started having local artists teach classes there. And
nice.
They very kindly invited me to teach classes there. And I already knew that I kind of wanted to be an art teacher because so many of the artists that I admired were teachers themselves. And so that gave me a taste of it before I went to art school. And so that kind of gave me a career path, like, oh, if I study hard enough, then I can teach other people and pass on this information.
Right. So your sort of, as it stands today, is your sort of the way that you practice your art, is that you mainly sort of go the sort of teaching route? So do you do much gallery sort of stuff, like, or do you do like commissions and all that sort of stuff as well, or just?
I do commissions on occasion. I've in the past, especially when I was saving up for art school, I would support myself with portrait commissions. Some very strange, lots of pets, lots of sort of weird, can you please draw this tattoo?
Yes.
But not like a tattoo design. Like I want a picture of the tattoo that I got.
Oh.
Like lots of very strange commissions. I don't really do that kind of work anymore because it's not as enjoyable or fulfilling to me. The main venue for my art is through teaching. That's
Mm.
where I do most of my drawings are done in the classroom with other students. Right now, because of the pandemic, they are done in a virtual classroom. Um, and I don't display my work at galleries, although it's something that I am considering. But I know that's an entirely different pathway. You have to really make a concerted effort to get together a body of work and stick with that, landscape or still life or flowers, whatever. Yeah.
You got to pick your discipline.
Yes. Yes.
Can't be too fluid when it comes to the gallery sort of side of things, which is
Yeah.
I get it, but it's also kind of like, oh, what? I suppose when you get big enough, they kind of let you do whatever, because then it's your name, not your works. I suppose. I guess that happens. So I guess we should all strive for that point.
I mean, yeah, I have no experience with galleries, to be honest, outside of like participating in this or that like one-off show, and even that was like very small-time local galleries. Um, but I sort of just followed the advice that one of my teachers gave me. One of my teachers, his name is Henry Yan, and he told me don't bother with the galleries because they'll say, oh, we really like your figurative work, but can you please paint some flowers? Flowers are really in this year, and they'll always try to change what you work on, and they take such a large percentage, usually 50%. Um, and so, he told me that he just sells his work to his students at workshops.
Oh,
And that's basically what I do. I sell my work to people who are interested, who contact me either through my website or through Instagram, or to my students, if they like a particular drawing. But for me, I I like not having to worry about selling the work, because then that means I can draw just for the pleasure of it or paint just for the pleasure of it without worrying about, making it more appealing to people, because you really do have to think about, is it going to look nice in someone's kitchen or bedroom or wherever it's going to hang? And not that many people want a, a nude figure in their kitchen. That already the work I do is less inclined toward gallery work.
yeah, I get what you mean. Thank. I can't knock galleries too much. I do. I'm already. I have a gallery representing me, so I can't say too much about that. but I get what you mean. I get exactly what you mean. Like
Yeah.
the they re- a lot of galleries, you got to really be very careful with them, because you got to really vet them. And I found the
Mhm.
best way to do that is you talk to other artists that are rep by them, and you kind of get a feel through the other artists, because I feel like artists, they understand other artists really really well. You
Yeah.
don't. It's really easy to sort of gauge in. They'll tell you like straight up if the gallery sucks or not. So it's always a good place that I reach out to first. Like, hey, how's this gallery? How they treat you and all that. But thankfully,
Yeah.
I found a really really great gallery. Treat me really good, and don't take that crazy of a cut either. And they do a lot of work for me too. So it's exactly what galleries should be about, And they don't try and make
Yeah.
me paint flowers just because flowers are in.
Yeah, that's
Thankfully,
fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah, and
So
I can't knock galleries either. I mean, most of the artists that I know are gallery painters. So yeah,
yeah.
and I got my first teaching gig at a gallery from a gallery owner. Yeah.
So you mentioned you mentioned self teaching.
Mm.
Um, it's funny that you said that actually, because a mutual friend of us, Kai Lung Q, who actually connected us,
Yeah.
he talked about self teaching rather than what is it, being self taught, and
Hmm.
he kind of painted a pretty interesting sort of picture about how a lot of people sort of cling to that sort of idea of uh, fame, if you will, of like being self-taught. But
Right.
he sort of pushed it away, and he's like, no, I'm not self-taught. I'm self-teaching. So he kind of
Hmm.
put himself in a mindset of a sponge. Is that something that you do, or is it? Have you had that conversation with him or anything like that, or is that something that you sort of picked up along the way?
I have talked to Kai about his background, and I think he's probably much more self-taught than I was. I mean, knowing what I know about which art school he went to, which famously is like very anti-representational, and
Yeah.
being a representational
Yeah.
artist at a modern art school must be very, very difficult. But
Mm.
I do think that there is a difference between self-taught and self-teaching. I would say that we're all teaching ourselves all the time, at least, you know, uh, especially representational artists need to strive for greater levels of understanding constantly, right? We need to constantly try to become uh, better artists on a technical level as well as on an emotional level. So we're always learning. I especially learn from observing other artists' work. Um, when I go on social media, I see all these artists that I have never heard of before and am exposed to new ideas that I was not exposed to at art school. Even though the art school that I went to, I was fortunate that they had a lot of different artists from different backgrounds. So I was able to not sort of be shoehorned into one method or one lineage of art. Um, but I think that there's nothing special about teaching yourself. I had to teach myself because I couldn't afford to take lessons. There was no one that I could afford to take lessons from. At the time when I was learning, I had I did not know about them if they existed, like online art schools or people's YouTube pages where they seemed pretty primitive. I think this was in 2012, like the beginning of 2012. So it's not like, millennia ago, but that's a pretty long time ago. I think the internet
Far
has
enough.
advanced, especially, yeah, especially this past year. Lots of people, lots of artists are offering online classes more than ever. So it's fairly easy to teach yourself from home. But there's no pride in it, right? Because none of us are entirely self-taught. We're all piggybacking off of the work that other people have done. Um,
Yeah.
and that's human history, right? Going back from Renaissance, I mean, Renaissance artists just piggybacking off of what the Romans and Greeks did, and so I think there's no shame in learning from other people. I encourage people actually to go to art school because it's so helpful. I think if you can get the right teachers.
Mm.
If you can't, it's a giant waste of money. But if you can get the right teachers, then definitely, there's no need to force yourself to stay inside your bedroom just so you can claim to be self-taught. Yeah.
Yeah, that's completely right. I've I found myself being in Australia. There's not there is no like place that you can go to learn any sort of a representational sort of way of painting. We can't. I say this like Australia has kind of like one art style and one style only, like, and that's just like this postmodern type of bubble, and that's
Yeah.
what everybody teaches here. Even like the big art schools, that's all they only teach, and even like I think we might have like one atelier type of school that teaches representational, um, but they're very small, and there's only one of them that I've ever heard of in all of Australia. So I really
Yeah.
had to like cling to like online. Had to cling to like books and all that sort of stuff. Thankfully, I did end up finding a really good teacher, and then thankfully, as I started to learn, so did the internet start to progress, and so I
Hmm.
found more and more people's like streamlined arts.
Yeah.
It became online and stuff like that. You buy them online and stuff like that. It wasn't just DVDs anymore. It's just that you could download
Hmm.
them, buy them, download them. And then New Masters Academy came along, and I was like, oh,
Right.
just
Yeah.
bring everything, whatever I could get my hands on at that point. I was like, I just, and then it's incredible because now with 2020, we've got access to the most incredible artists uh, that are alive today in the
Yeah.
21st century, and incredible. And we got access to them like right now. Like I just pick up
Yeah.
my phone, and I'm like, whoa, there they all are, and I could message them, and
Yeah.
that's how we got here, through the internet.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's a miracle, really.
Mm.
And I would say that artists today are generally, if you look at the timeline of art history, we are better trained and have a better sense of every technical aspect than anyone who has any generation of artists that has been alive before. You
Mm.
know, Not to say that there haven't been better artists in the past, but I would say today there's like a whole renaissance of representational art happening. And by and large, people are so technically gifted now because there's so much access to information, which is wonderful.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, especially the level of our materials, like just our materials
Yes.
alone. It incredible. I don't, you know the artist Soroya?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you've ever seen photos of his studio, and like you see his paintbrushes all like just in the jars and stuff like that, and you're like looking at them, and they're just like hog hair looking brushes, and they look so like really brittle sort of stuff. And he was making
Yeah.
incredible paintings. Like I just look at my paintbrushes now, and I'm like Rosemary and Co type of things, and like these
Hmm.
synthetics, and they're incredible, and they last years if you take good care of them.
Yeah.
And like just the paintbrushes alone, let alone the paint, there's just the access to just incredible, incredible. Not only the teaching but the materials, and it's yeah,
Right.
it's crazy. So online, have you taken to that as well this year, or is that something that you've always done, or how's that?
No, it was this year was the first time that I taught online, and it was completely out of necessity. I had had requests from people asking me to do online classes before, but I have to admit I was pretty lazy about it because, managing the studio, I had a studio which I've had to shut down since the pandemic, waiting to reopen. But managing the studio was kind of, you know, not necessarily a full-time gig, but as much as I wanted to put into managing something. And so the idea of doing online classes on top of that was sort of like, eventually I'll get to it. But
Yeah,
when the pandemic happened, I really had to act quickly. And thankfully, my students were so gracious. There were lots of technical mess ups and glitches the first class that I held. But they were very, very patient and very kind while I worked through all of that stuff. And I was able to get them up and running really quickly. And it's actually worked out so much nicer than I had imagined. It's been especially nice to have people from all over the world be able to join the classes. Um, I have had a few students from Australia as well,
nice,
and the
nice.
time zone gap is pretty huge, but
Yeah,
they luckily, are able to still participate in the class. And I had done online lessons before, like through Skype, with people in various time zones, but never on this scale. And it's been wonderful. And I've also been able to do things that I haven't been able to do in a traditional classroom. Like, I can draw on top of students' artwork
yeah.
easily now on the iPad. Yeah, which is something, I would have to use tracing paper in the classroom before. So it's made critiques and lectures so much easier. And it's definitely something I plan on doing even after, our society starts to open back up.
Mm. That's pretty cool. I've been hearing the same story again and again and again as I talk to more artists. It's the exact same thing. Like I never used to, but now I have to, sort of thing. And but then exactly like you said, a lot of them have kind of found like it's not that hard once you start doing it, and then
Yeah.
it's actually got a lot of benefits once you start doing it too. Like teaching people in Australia. I bet you didn't think like you'd have people across the world. Was it 19 hours difference? Like just
Yeah.
yeah, trying to join into your classes and stuff. It's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy how that we as artists have managed to just. I think we were the quickest people to turn this into like a positive. I swear.
Yeah.
Just looking around, I swear we were like the quickest to just jump on top of it. I think that's just out of necessity of of
Hmm.
of the entrepreneurial sort of lifestyle we live as artists. Just
Yeah.
yeah, we it's kind of always like we're always looking for like how we can stay on top, and yeah, it shows this year for sure. The
Yeah.
yeah, that's crazy. So what what was it exactly? So you said that you were just drawing as a kid, so
Mhm.
that just like every other sort of kid, like what was it that sort of became this this catalyst, this from just drawing because it was fun and stuff like that, but then where was that change where you were like, oh no, I think I like this a bit more than just for fun? Was there a actual moment, or was it a series of moments that sort of led up to this, like, oh, this is kind of what I do now?
Yeah, I I don't know if it was a series of moments, or I mean a specific moment.
Mm,
I certainly think that I have a sibling, but my sister is 8 years older than I am. So I was essentially an only child because when I was little, my sister was already off with her friends in middle school, and so I was in my house alone. So I would draw a lot. Um, uh, and I think because I had so much time to myself when I was young, um, I was able to pour a lot of myself into my artwork. And, I wasn't making masterpieces or anything when I was a child, but I was definitely creating my own little worlds, making little comic strips and looking at books that my family would buy me. Like old books with a lot of old illustrations that I would copy. Um, and so I think because I already had that experience when I was a child, as I went through elementary school, as I went through middle school, um, I built up a reputation as the kid that draws, or oh, that kid draws really well,
yeah.
and people would, I was not really good at anything else. I mean, I was terrible at math, and I was incredibly, tragically shy, and sort of just sat in the back of the classroom all the time. So to have people who ordinarily
Mm,
I would not interact with come over to me and look at my artwork and say, oh, I really like that. It was empowering for me. And I think that sense of empowerment translated into adulthood. When I was working in a series of odd jobs, I had a very, very strange amount of like just gigs. Like I worked at a yoga center managing their website. Even though I had never really managed a website before, I just kind of like talked my way into getting hired by different places so that I wouldn't have to work like retail. Um, but I didn't, even though it was better than working like in a restaurant or something, which I
yeah.
eventually did do, and I absolutely hated. I just didn't enjoy any job. Like no job that I had brought me any sense of fulfillment or joy or purpose. The only thing that brought me a sense of purpose and fulfillment was artwork. And it took me actually a really long time to realize that, simply because um, I was very naive and I didn't know anything about the art world. So I didn't know that you could train yourself to draw. I thought you
Mm.
were either born with a natural talent or you weren't. And so I thought the entire purpose of art school was to just like sort of come up with some conceptual group of paintings that's going to, make you a lasting name in art history books forever. You graduate from art school and you have a gallery show and then everyone buys your work.
Mm,
And I didn't know that there was a way to improve. And so
mm,
I didn't even try until I was older and realized it was what I wanted to do for a living.
mm.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. It's true. Sometimes you that it's I haven't been on the outside looking in for quite a long time, so you kind of forget what it's like until
Mm-hmm.
you do like a beginners class and you're teaching a beginners class and they're all like, oh, okay, so I get it. There's actually a process to this.
Yeah.
You don't just start at the end and finish with the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I like to say it's one big magic trick. And I think
Mm-hmm.
us as artists, we're really masters of illusion and the way that we present our works. Even talk, even now that I think about it, when I've got a Michelangelo book here, and he even talked
Mm-hmm.
about how he burnt all of his like early works because he didn't want anybody to know that it took him all this to get to there. He just
Yeah.
wanted to really perpetuate this idea of like I'm the greatest because I am the greatest. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, well, damn.
Yeah.
That's
That's
where it all started.
relatable. Yeah.
Just this
Yeah.
idea that comes out of nowhere. Thanks.
Yeah. we do though have this idea in society, and I don't know where it came from. I think it's like maybe late 18th or late 19th century, early 20th century, with the rise of you know, impressionism and modernism, of this like the idea of this tortured, misunderstood genius artist who just, you know, like whose talent is not appreciated by the rest of the world, but you know, just the idea of artists as geniuses, which of course is not the case, because all of those artists had training,
Mm.
like academic training. And yeah, I definitely relate to the idea of not wanting to show my early hideous work, though. I do show it to my students to let them know that, you know,
I'm not
look,
a god.
yeah, we all have to climb the same hills and mountains. Like none of
Yeah.
us get to the top just on a rocket.
Mm.
It does not work that way.
Mm.
But it still doesn't make it any less embarrassing, uh,
That's for
showing
sure.
hideous drawings. Yeah.
That's for sure. Yeah, I think people really love. I don't know what it is, how it became so romanticized, but that idea of the tortured artist, or the broke artist, or the starving
Hmm.
artist, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. That became so romanticized, and even like the biggest film, it's not the biggest film anymore. I think Avengers overtook it, but the biggest grossing
Mhm.
film worldwide, Titanic, and
Yeah.
Leo's character Jack, he was lucky to get on there. He was a starving artist. He was portrayed as like
Hmm.
this like vagabond traveling to place to place to place.
Right.
Even like the biggest idea sold to people is that artists are like poor and just just broken sort of people just
That's
grabbing whatever they
so
can.
funny. Yeah, I do not think that was the case in France at that time. I think if he had a modicum of talent, he would be
Mm.
in pretty high demand and his work would sell. I mean,
Yeah.
even Van Gogh's work sold, and it was completely,
Mm.
you know, antithetical to what was in fashion at the time. So, you
Mm.
know, uh,
Exactly.
I do think that's really funny, the idea of the starving artist.
Yeah.
Um, certainly there are people who graduate from art school who cannot get work as an artist, but I think that more has more to do with our horrible, at least in the United States, our horrible system of expensive, overpriced art schools that are not going to give you the tools that you need to actually uh, paint pictures.
That's just universities in general. They just don't
Yeah,
have any incentive to lower the price because it's like, okay, where else are you
right.
gonna go?
Yeah,
There's just
yeah.
no incentive to lower the price at all, and in some cases, I think it's just some sort of tax fraud that they just hike up the prices and go like, At the end of the
Yeah.
day, even in Australia, just a bill was passed last week where all of our university degrees, the prices are going up. I can't remember, 10%, something like that,
Wow.
by next year. So all the degrees are going up again. It's just the crap that we have to deal with, honestly.
Yeah.
But thank God that we've got the internet, and not only does that provide a place for artists to secure work, whereas just coming out of universities traditionally, you might have to just jump on whatever. But we're able to sort of sell ourselves, but we're also, like we were saying in the beginning, we're finding all these places that can teach us, and
Yeah.
setting up these, like what you're doing, or like what every other artist is doing nowadays, out of necessity and out of whatever they just happen to be doing their whole lives and stuff like that, just jumping on the internet sort of bandwagon. I'm forever grateful that I was born in this time
Yeah.
because the internet is exactly how I was able to progress my learning and
Hmm.
actually continue to learn today.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
it's really an amazing tool.
mm, that's for sure. I like to talk about like people's sort of philosophies behind their work because I think as artists we kind of a lot of people sort of skip that and well, not as artists we kind of have that understanding, but like people outside in our audiences could kind of like look at our works and go, oh, incredible, swipe up to the next one. But do you hold any sort of philosophical ideas about your work or art in general that you kind of find yourself coming to? Because I find as I work, uh, even just painting or drawing or anything like that, I'm constantly just thinking about, the cycle of making a painting, how it relates to my life, how it relates to everything I do in my life, and the way that I conduct myself in my life. Do you have moments like that, or is stuff that you sort of bounce around in your head, these sort of philosophical ideas about your work, or?
Um, I do. I don't know if I have philosophical ideas about how, my work sort of mirrors my life as a whole.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, hopefully it would be, that my work is improving and my life is improving as well,
Yeah.
not the other way around. Um, but I do have a general philosophy of artwork, and I have fairly strong opinions on it. I mean, there's definitely artists who I like and appreciate whose work does not align with my views.
Mm,
Um, but I have always thought that it is far less about the subject matter that you are drawing or painting, and far more about the way that you interpret that subject matter. Uh, it is far more about technical ability, and the way that you use that technical ability to uh, not necessarily tell a story to the viewer, but to create a moment for the viewer, right? Create a little world for the viewer to get lost in
mm,
inside of a picture frame. And so that's sort of my guiding philosophy is how can I create something that is, not necessarily beautiful. I really think artwork ultimately should be beautiful, but there has to be artwork that isn't beautiful, right? Because the world is not entirely beautiful, and there needs to be a place for work that explores the ugly side of things. If
mm.
you are familiar with Jennifer Saville, or Jenny Saville, I think is her name, she has these whole sort of grotesque figures that are bloodied and uh, just like big blobs of meat almost. It's like a Lucian Freud taken to an extreme, and her work I still find beautiful because of the technical ability behind it, but it's sort of like hard to look at because it's so ugly, right? But my guiding philosophy is to create something that is pleasing to look at, if not beautiful,
Mm.
that prizes technique and the way that technique is used above subject matter, and that tries to involve the viewer in a tiny little moment that they can look at and get lost in.
Mm. It
Yeah.
is even more important nowadays since everybody's attention span is like 2 seconds long.
It's a very annoying. I, I mean, I certainly am one of those people where I sort of will like find myself mindlessly scrolling through Instagram and like not pausing to watch more than,
Yeah.
the first 2 seconds of a video. And then I have to stop myself and say, oh, what have I become? I can certainly spare 30 seconds to watch a video by an artist that I truly admire.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, you do definitely have to grab people's attention. And it is a little annoying because I think a lot of artists' work gets lost.
Mm.
Uh, Artists that I really admire and like, their work doesn't look as good in a thumbnail,
Yeah.
so it doesn't get
Yeah.
as much attention.
Mm.
Um, and, that means probably their work is doing better in a gallery because it makes more of an impact, when it's seen in person on a wall. But, you know, yeah, that the in minuscule attention spans of people today certainly don't help.
Definitely
Um,
don't help.
yeah,
Yeah, and then on top of that, yeah, exactly, the thumbnail size. Like, if you look at the size of my phone and just like hold it up to like any painting behind me, it's like this size compared to like life size sometimes, and
yeah,
it's crazy because sometimes even I follow artists and then they'll put up on their story of just them like at the function and they got the piece hanging on the wall and you see it compared to other people and you're like, whoa, that's actually really big. And you don't,
yeah,
it just skews your sense of size because sometimes these bigger works, a lot of the energy comes from the size of it, right?
yeah,
Not just like how they did it and what's happening in it, but the size of it, the energy, you stand in front of it and you just fully engulfed by it and just feeling it there, and you just that's completely gone when it's this big and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I did not feel the same way when I stood in front of it compared to seeing it before it came in. And then
Right.
exactly what you were saying before about how a lot of your favorite artists, like their works don't even get seen. You know, I follow so many people, and a lot of my favorite artists that I interact with all the time, they've only got like 300 followers, 200 followers. Not that it means like anything prestigious wise, but it does mean that like nobody's seen their work. And I'm
Right.
like, I just get angry sometimes, and I'm like, these people are incredible, and I love their work. You know, I'm always sharing their work, and nobody's seeing it. You know, and that's neither here nor there about just the algorithm. I don't know if you want to talk about that. That's always working against us.
Yeah, I mean, lately it seems to, I feel like it goes in cycles on
Mm,
social media. I mean, on Instagram, I'm a pretty lazy Instagrammer. I mean, I was a reluctant Instagrammer. So the only
yeah.
reason I joined Instagram is because when I was hired to teach at Sadie Valeri Atelier, um, the other artists, we had like a little get together to celebrate the fact that, she was hiring like, I think, three or four other teachers at the time. Um, and so I got to meet them. And of course, they're all really wonderful artists. Like, I don't know if you know Emilio Villalba, who's really, really wonderful artist. And uh, uh, Kustush, I think Lindsay Kustush. Um, uh, just great artists who I really admire. And they were all talking about Instagram. And I thought, oh, I don't have an Instagram. I really have to get on Instagram. And so
Mm,
I made one. And something about the algorithm shot my work like
mm,
to all these people, and I was able to get a large following fairly quickly. Um, but I post like basically now whenever I feel like it.
mm.
And so sometimes I'll notice I'll lose a few hundred followers because I
Yeah.
don't post for a month. And other times I'll gain a few thousand because someone will repost something of mine. Um, I think that the algorithm definitely skews towards people who are like influencers who post constantly,
Mm.
and it's not meant to help artists. I don't think the
Uh,
platform was ever meant for artists. It was meant for photographers or people to
yeah.
share selfies. So I'm really surprised that like there's so many artists that use it. But um, you know, uh, we were talking about like the scale of artwork. Um, I think one of my students in my classes saw a painting that I did on the wall at my studio, and when they had seen it online, they thought it was huge, and it's like 9 by 12. There's really no sense of scale, and I definitely think social media it helps small scale work and it
Mm,
hurts large scale work because there's
mm.
no way that you can capture the detail and the grandeur of a large scale work in such a small thumbnail, such a small aspect ratio. Even if you post lots of detail shots, it doesn't
Yeah.
do it justice. Yeah.
Fully. Yeah, exactly. It works the opposite way for the smaller pictures. Yeah. I only just thought about that then. Yeah, it does definitely. Um so your work, just thumbing through Instagram, is kind of mainly what I kind of just mainly see is just like just charcoal predominant. Like you do paintings and stuff, but is it kind of just
Hmm.
charcoal predominant because you teach a lot more like sort of drawing classes, or is that kind of how it goes? Or
Yeah, because I do a lot of my drawing in the classroom with my students. I just get a lot more charcoal drawing done. I also like charcoal a lot. It's my favorite medium by far.
oh yeah,
I mean, I like painting a lot. I also like ballpoint pen. I draw in my sketchbook with ballpoint pen a lot. But there's something about charcoal that's very painterly without the mess and without the expense,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's so forgivable and it's so malleable and expressive. And a lot of people have a difficult time with it because they have a difficult time letting go. So
Mm,
they're too tight, and so they can't get the same effect. And so I like doing a lot of charcoal drawing because I can show people, how to use charcoal through it, especially because it seems to be a medium that many people have difficulty with. Um, but there's nothing. there's no greater reason that I work in charcoal other than the fact it's something that I like. It's
Yeah.
cheap and convenient. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's something about charcoal drawings that are just really, really beautiful, and even your drawings in particular, incredible drawings. Like if
Thank you.
I'm gonna be trying to post up like images of people's works as the
Hmm.
podcast progresses. So hopefully people are seeing that as we've been talking. But really, really beautiful. I love the way that you just you hone in one section and you let go, and then it's brought back, and then it's let go. And it's incredible. I don't know how you sort of you think like that sometimes. I'm like, ah, damn. When I look at these things, I'm like that's a really great one. You
Thank
know,
you.
is that this in we? I kind of talk about when people ask me how do you paint and all that sort of stuff. I find myself. I find it's all pretty much predominantly muscle memory, and I kind of
Mhm.
found that out by doing digital work as well. That when I went digital, like when I'm doing digital work, I'm like, oh crap, what the hell is going on here? You know, because a
Yeah.
lot of my muscle memory is like holding a brush. I know how much paint I've got on the brush. I know what color I just mixed up because I'm doing it right now. You know, I'm holding it. I see it, and I'm applying as much as I want, and I'm like not applying as much as I need and stuff like that. It's give
Yeah.
and take, and I can really feel that. So I feel like it's for me, it's really muscle memory, sort of intuitive. Do you feel like that's the same thing for you, or something different?
I do think it's a lot of muscle memory. I mean, I always encourage my students to draw various sizes, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Draw small, draw big, draw different subject matter, switch between painting and drawing all the time. Because if your brain gets too used to doing one thing all the time, you lose the ability to do anything else.
Yeah.
Um, and I find if I go too long without painting, my drawings become too tight and too overly rendered. And likewise, if I go too long without drawing, my paintings become too sloppy,
Mm.
not tight enough. Um, yeah, muscle memory, it plays a huge role in how we draw.
Mm.
Um, Certainly, I normally prefer like direct drawing or direct painting, where I'm working on one section of the painting at a time and kind of like working my way across. So, if I go too long without drawing a figure, I might fall back into old bad habits that I have. Like I tend to elongate the figure.
Mm.
I always telling my students that I'm like a secret mannerist, like
Mm.
in the vein of El Greco. Like I will
Right.
stretch out people really, really long, give them
Yeah.
enormously long legs and long necks and everything. I think, they always say that artist puts a little bit of themselves into the work. I'm
Mm.
kind of tall and skinny, so maybe there is something to that. But if I go too long without doing figure drawing, I fall back into those habits and I lose the muscle memory of like, okay, this is how long the torso is, or this is the amount of pressure that I need to use to create this particular effect. But if you've done it enough, it comes back really, really quickly.
Yeah.
Like within an hour or two, you
Yeah.
fall back into the rhythm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That it doesn't Sergeant do that a lot? Isn't he said that like he makes the heads really small on like the figurative sort of things? I've heard that being said. I've never seen one in person, but
I don't. I did see a couple of Sargent paintings in person, but
mm.
they seemed pretty flawless to me. So if he did, he definitely fixed
He
that by
nailed it.
the finished product. Yeah, Sargent, I think just one of the best draftsmen
Mm.
that we've had in the history of art. So
Mm.
if he did make the heads too small, he certainly made it work because I
Mm.
I love his work.
Yeah, I heard he did it deliberately, like to sort of
Ah,
as like a stylistic sort of thing. Like that's some
to make the figure appear
yeah,
grander or
yeah,
something.
yeah,
Yeah,
with his life size sort of paintings and stuff like that. But I don't.
yeah.
Yeah, living in Australia, we don't really get access to anything like that.
I mean, I definitely like I
Mm.
look at and admire a lot of non-fine artists, right? Like
Mm.
I look at a lot of comic book artists, a lot
Oh
of
yeah,
game design, concept artists,
yeah.
even a lot of like just cartoonists.
Mm.
And I look at the way that they play with proportion because they're not bound by reality the same way
Mm.
that a fine artist would be bound by reality. At least a representational fine artist. And so they can play with proportions in a way that most artists don't dare to. And that is something to take away, right? I try to put that into my work, and my teachers especially did play with proportion, to make the figures appear more elegant or whatnot. But definitely, you could make the head slightly smaller makes the figure have a grander appearance, right? The head too big, it makes the person look kind of like a hobbit, Yeah. So although humans tend to have like fairly big heads, and so that's
Apparently
pretty
getting
common
bigger.
mistake.
So
What's
I've
that?
heard. Apparently they're getting bigger. So I've heard. As we progress, isn't that what we're supposed to turn into? We're supposed to turn into those what aliens kind of look like with the big heads
Yes,
and the
the
skinny bodies.
grays,
I've
yeah, with
heard. I've
enormous
heard that's what we're
heads.
turning into.
Yeah, and now with the selfie filters, we can turn even faster into that, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. So a lot of your work that's done in life, right? That'll
Mhm.
be all done from life. So do you use any sort of photography or utilize any of that? Take that back to, I don't know if you have a studio or anything like that. You take that
I
back into there to work on those, or not really?
I do use photography.
Mm,
I have no qualms about working with photography. I
yeah.
prefer working from life,
Mm,
actually, because I find it easier to work from life. Uh,
yeah.
I know that there's a sort of philosophical divide among some
Yeah.
representational artists about the merits of photography, or
Yeah.
some artists will never use photography. But, I'm not a purist. None of my teachers were purists.
Mm,
And I figure if they can create a masterpiece using photo,
mm.
and pretty crappy photo at that, that there's no reason that I can't do the same. So I use photography, but it's not something that I prefer over working from life. There
Mm,
is definitely an energy that you get from working in
mm.
life, and
Yeah.
of course you can always step slightly to the left or right to create, a stereoscopic
Move the
effect.
light,
With
put it somewhere else.
yes,
Yeah.
you can't get that in a photo. It's too flat.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not something I especially use. Now, if I were going to do large scale painting, and I always have these grand plans of eventually doing like historical paintings, on a larger scale,
Yeah.
multi-figure compositions
Oh
that never
wow.
really come to fruition because, it just takes so much time and I'm really impatient. So I far
No.
prefer painting a tiny little picture in one sitting than I do like this giant thing in multiple sittings. But
Mm,
obviously for larger work and multi-figure work, you have to use photos.
mm. Yeah.
It's too impractical
Yeah.
unless you're independently wealthy to hire like 3 models or something.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I would love to see these paintings be done. These historical type of ones. Did you have any historical type of ones in mind, or like just off
um,
the bat, or?
I my family, my dad's side of the family has Scottish heritage, and here in the United States we have these things called like a Highland Games or Celtic fairs, which
Okay.
is like
Mm.
to celebrate Scottish and Irish heritage. And so
Oh, cool.
uh, there's always historical reenactors there from sort of the Baroque period on. And so I've gone to several of those and just taken lots and lots of photos of the
Oh
people
wow.
in 16th and 17th century garb, and planning on doing multi-figure compositions from those photos. But you know, nothing particular. Like I don't have a sort of aim of creating, like a grand religious art or something in the vein of like the Renaissance masters. I just think it would be nice to have multi-figure compositions.
Yeah.
A lot of like I think a lot of the most talented artists today
Mm.
are from China and Russia,
Yeah.
and a lot of those artists tend to do these large scale multi-figure compositions, which I just really admire. And
Mm.
my favorite series of paintings is Mucha. Alphonse Mucha has the
Yes.
Slav epic,
Yes.
which is just I think the most wonderful series of multi-figure compositions. So if I
Mm.
could do something even like a tenth as nice as that, it would be nice. But not necessarily anything more special than like just I want to paint people in costumes because I think it would be fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a big appeal to that because we kind of look around today and we're so used to just like living where we are now and seeing the norms of places that
Yeah.
when we're taken back. That's why period pieces like movies or TV shows are so big because it's kind of way out of the norm and people are wearing and
Hmm.
doing things and every way of life is completely different. So yeah,
Yeah.
I get the appeal. I get the appeal.
Yeah.
It's a really amazing place. And the multi-figure type of things, I'm very inspired by that, and I'm a really big fan of Soroya in particular,
Hmm.
uh, just because his his way that he paints with the multi figures. Even if I don't know if you've ever been to the Spanish Society in New York, where
I haven't.
he did the whole Hispanic sort of culture of Spain, the culture of Spain or something like it was called like that, but it's a huge series of works. I can't remember the dimensions, but floor to ceiling, stretching out across the whole room. It's essentially what killed him at the end of his life. It
Oh.
took so much from him. Yeah, it's incredible. So if you ever get the opportunity to go see that, that'd be sick. Yeah, I've got to cross an ocean to get there, but but
I, have never. I have left California precisely two times, and it was both to go to Portland. So I have a lot of museums to see. I
yes.
actually did not go to my first art museum until I was 23.
Oh really?
Yeah, so I
Oh
was
wow.
actually already enrolled in art school when I first went to see
Whoa.
an art museum. Yeah.
Is there just
I didn't
none?
really lead a cultured life as a child.
Stay indoors and practice art.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Even going back to the camera. Now I think
Hmm.
about it. So Roy, when he did his multi figured sort of scenes, but his Hispanic society, he did painting studies with like individuals and stuff. But he also utilized the camera, and he utilized the camera a lot, like a lot. And he'd take even a lot of his compositions are credited in the because he used to work for his wife's dad was a photographer, so he used to work for
Hmm.
him, and so a lot of his compositions credited to like the compositions that you typically find with a camera, these really unique
Yeah.
perspectives, like from above and like from below, shot upwards, sort of stuff like that.
Hmm.
So the use of the camera, people like to think nowadays that like, oh, these they never used a camera back then. Are you kidding me? I'm like, but no, seriously, people like whenever there's a helping hand from technology, artists are like, yep, bring it in, and they
Yes.
have
Yes.
forever. We there was a
Yeah.
period where we didn't paint on canvas. We painted on like well, it is called something, but it's like wooden blocks, right? The
Right.
Yeah,
And
before canvas.
fresco and all of
Yeah,
that.
exactly. And then canvas came about because it was easy to transport. You could just roll it up, right? You could send it.
Yeah.
You didn't need to like hire a big thing and do something like that. You just roll it up.
Yeah.
There's all through history adopted the incredible helping hand that technology offers us.
Hmm.
So yeah, when we talk about photographing things, I'm definitely on the same page as you are.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so
I
mm,
mean, we used to have only basically one type of brush, like a round
mm,
brush, right? But
yeah,
now we have many different types of brushes, many different types of paints.
mm,
Yeah, I think there's no reason to not. Alphonse Mucha also used
mm,
photography for the Slav epic,
mm,
which is kind of interesting because you look at the way he used the photo reference. He's not copying, right? He's doing exactly what he would do from life, which is using it as the inspiration for the pose.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's that's what artists have always done. Whether we're from life or from photo, we never, unless you're trying to represent what you're seeing, right? Most
Mhm.
artists don't really go like, okay, there's a clock behind them. I'll put the clock in behind them. There's a couch
Yeah.
right there that looks goofy when I draw it, but whatever, it's right there, so I'll put it in. We always pick and choose what goes into
Yes.
it. It's
Yes.
not like photography where like a bird flew by, so it's in there. We don't just like, like people look at our paintings like, why
Yeah,
is there a thumb over the painting there? It's like, oh, I
yeah,
just had my thumb in the way while I was looking at the.
yeah,
That doesn't really
yeah.
happen. We've always like pick and choose. It's the what's it called when like artists choose? We've got like an artist license, or I think people call it like
Artistic license. Yeah,
artistic license. That's it. That when
yeah.
we pick and choose what we want to put in, what we don't want to put in. Yeah. Coming to the you mentioned the Russian and the Chinese painters of today.
Mhm.
Do you happen to follow the Imperial Academy of Russia, or I think that's what they're called, or something like that?
I I don't know if I follow their like official account, but
Right.
I probably follow most of them, and I hope it doesn't freak the artists out that I like follow all of the
Yes.
graduating class.
Yes. Yes. Me too. Me too.
Uh, but they're all wonderful artists, and I just think that they are doing some of the most exciting work,
Yeah,
exciting representational work out there.
that's for sure.
Um, yeah, and it's so different than the
Mm,
way that we learn
yeah.
here in America or even in the West. It's just its own unique lineage and own unique way of doing things. I don't know if it's necessarily 100% better, but it certainly produces a lot of really talented artists.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah,
think the pieces speak for themselves, honestly.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
that, no matter if we think like it's a great method or not, like
Mhm.
just look at the artists that are coming from that. It's incredible. Like
Yeah.
they just had that graduating class maybe like a couple months ago. Did you see all that popping up and around all over
I
the
did
place?
see some videos of their, I don't know what it's called, their like final presentation.
Yeah, it's called
Um,
it's called a defense. It's called a diploma defense or something like that, where
ah,
they bring their works in, but they have a prepared speech and all these sorts of
mhm.
things for it like that. Yeah, I don't know other than that, but yeah.
It was amazing to watch and sort of horrifying. I saw one clip where the people dropped someone's painting, and it got a giant hole right in the middle of the canvas. But
Ah,
yeah,
oh
but
boy.
the artist still went up there and talked about their work. I'm hopefully got a good passing
Hopefully.
grade. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. The damage to works, especially canvas works, and 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 even more so papered like drawings and stuff like that. You get a little
Mhm.
bit of water on that. There's no taking that away.
No, yeah. I mean, I work on newsprint, which is already a pretty fugitive medium. I mean, the paper starts, turning yellow after about a year of being
My
displayed,
God.
and so, it becomes very brittle after like it's not going to last more than probably 100 years at the most.
Mm,
But again, you could go into philosophy about whether or not art needs to be archival.
yes.
The Impressionists painted on cardboard a
Mm,
lot, and
mm-hmm.
clearly they were not concerned with whether or not it would last,
Exactly.
millennia. So I figure I probably am not too concerned about that either. But it is terrible when you know you spill water or your cat walks across your drawing or something like that.
You get like little cat prints through it. Yeah.
Yes, I've definitely gotten that before.
Nice. It adds finesse to the work, I think.
Yes.
the the That's a really good thing that you brought up to the archival thing. I feel like I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the algorithm showing me all this crap, but like I
Mhm.
just keep seeing more like how to keep your work archival and what not to use for this and what not to use for that to keep it archival. But I remember Caesar Santos talking about this one time. Uh, I think Proco asked him or like Stan
Mhm.
I can't pronounce his last name, but
Prokopenko, I think.
yeah,
I don't know how to
yeah, I'm
exactly.
not gonna attempt. But yeah, I think he talked about that last time, and she was like, "I don't care," exactly. He's like, this is his work. It looks beautiful now, doesn't it? Sort of thing. Kind of,
Yeah,
yeah. So you hold that sort of philosophy yourself, or
I do. I mean, I take a few precautions. Like, I
of
think that there's
course,
no need to be. needlessly reckless.
Yeah,
Like
of
I
course.
don't use alizarin crimson in my paintings. I use permanent alizarin crimson because
Mm,
alizarin crimson, it will not be the same hot pink it was, 5 years from now. It's going to be a lot duller, and eventually it's just going to fade kind of to a gross color. Now, I just think if there's a way that I can avoid having a painting look pretty different within 5 years, then I will. But it's not like, I still do paintings in acrylic paint sometimes. And with that, I'm just basically painting with like craft paint. So I'm clearly not concerned about, the permanency of it. But yeah, I paint with permanent pigments if I can.
mm,
But I'm not too concerned about the materials. I'm not too concerned about whether it lasts after I'm dead.
mm,
I think museums would be more interested in someone's work if it were archival,
mm.
and certain collectors would be more interested in it. But for most people, they want to buy artwork because they want to hang it on their walls.
Yeah.
And so they're not really going to care about passing it on to their grandchildren,
Mm.
especially because we live in a society where, you know, most of our households are furnished with like IKEA furniture or something, and that's not going to
Yeah.
last more than like a few years. So I don't think it's a big deal, but definitely, I see artists who make a big effort to make sure that they're painting with like the best materials and the,
Mm.
the most archival materials and all of that. And their work looks like work that would hang in a museum. I also think that's probably because they try to paint that way.
Mm.
But if you are aiming to have your work in the history books, you probably want to pay more attention to that. But it's not really anything that I'm concerned by. There are
Mm.
so many representational artists out there, and there are so many contemporary modern artists out there that I am basically not even going to be a footnote of a footnote. So it doesn't really concern me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a good philosophical thing about that too, about how like the artwork kind of captures life and makes it immortal, but the artwork itself kind of just isn't and just continually
Right.
degrades and stuff. And it's a really interesting thing to think about sometimes. I think I spend too much time painting by myself
No, there's
with my
definitely
thoughts.
something to be said about that.
Yeah,
Like Jackson Pollock's paintings are completely falling apart, or at
yeah,
least, they were made out of house paint, so they're like a museum curator's nightmare. But yeah, I mean, those paintings, I maybe the artist had an inkling that they would last 1,000 years, but
mm,
I'm sure that wasn't at the forefront of their mind when they were
definitely not.
painting it. It was, get this commission done for the Medici family so I can,
Mm.
retire to my villa and continue enjoying life.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
I think we're more concerned about is this work a good work? I
Yes.
think that should be, on the top of your list. I think I've only been asked maybe once in my whole life, like, what's it on and is it like safe or is it archival sort of thing, like, and I was like, I guess so. I mean, I've got works from like 7 years ago that haven't changed, if that says anything. You
Yeah, you
know?
just respond with the rhetorical question, well, is life archival? And then then that
Exactly.
should satisfy them.
It's
Yeah.
like, oh, will you be alive to see this? you know?
Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
literally have told people who bought my drawings on newsprint, like, it
Mm.
will last as long as you are alive. So, maybe that made them uncomfortable because it made them think about their own mortality for a moment. But like, that answers their question. Like, is it archival? Well, for you, yes.
Yes.
For
Your
your
kids.
your descendants, maybe not,
Mm.
but they probably won't even want to hang it in their house by that point.
They're like, oh, I thought I was just getting a beautiful piece of work here. Now I'm thinking about my death. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um.
I also think that
Mm.
we tend to fetishize like the actual work, like, and diminish. We tend to fetishize the physical object, like
Mm.
the physical drawing or the physical painting, and not pay enough attention to the contents of it. Like people don't care about Rembrandt's work by and large because you know it's a beautiful painting. They care about it because it's in a museum and it's worth a lot of money, and like those kinds of things. And
Yeah.
so, I also think that might have something to do with my
Mm,
attitude towards that. Like it's not about the physical object. We live in an age where we can take pictures of the
mm,
artwork, and a picture will never 100% replicate the work,
mm,
but it will at least leave behind a version of the work.
mm.
And so there's no real need to get like hung up on like, this piece of
Yeah.
paper or this piece of canvas.
Yeah, it kind of comes, to the sort of uh the society that we live in with the way that we monetize things. And
Yes.
if you've seen, I don't actually, I was watching this good documentary the other night, the Social Dilemma. Have you seen that
Oh
yet?
yeah, I watched it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And even the way like big tech companies monetize, and the way that it's skewed everything just for the monetization sake. It's
Hmm.
great. If people haven't watched that, they should go watch that. Go check that out. It's really, really
Yeah.
interesting. It's funny how the necessity to sort of make money when you transition over to like this is full time, the
Hmm.
necessity sort of changes a lot of your work. Like you're picking up commissions that
Yeah.
you wouldn't normally pick up, but then you're like, I gotta, damn, it'd be nice to have a little bit more cushion. It'd be nice to
Yeah.
have something more than like something more substantial to eat tonight. So yeah, I'll do it. Yeah. but
Yeah.
but that's not to say that there isn't a good way to sort of monetize and navigate as an artist through this life. People do it very successfully, and through the use of the internet, we see it happening all the time.
Hmm.
People, there's back to that stigma we were talking about at the beginning,
Yeah.
the starving artist. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's this stigma that doesn't, it does exist. It's a thing for sure, but it doesn't have to. It's not this narrative, and it's not nobler to starve for your work. People get that sort of in their head, like I have to. You can.
Right.
You don't have to sacrifice your morals or your ethics to live like a good life.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can make beautiful works and make it work at the same time. You don't have to succumb to that sort of idea of like, oh no, I have to eat 2 minute noodles just for this work.
Yeah. And I
mm,
mean, no one's forcing anyone to,
mm,
paint advertisements for Coca-Cola or something,
exactly.
But, that's not to say a lot of artists are very happy doing that.
Mm,
I know a few illustrators and people who work in the concept design and gaming industry, and
mm.
those are completely commercial pursuits. There is
Yeah.
there is absolutely no, I mean, there I think are people who make video games as art,
Mm,
but the vast majority of it is purely profit driven. But there are artists who are doing really wonderful work, I would say even artistic work within the confines of a purely commercial industry. And
mm.
so you can still definitely, earn a decent living and without giving up your artistic credentials
Yeah,
or
for sure.
morals. Yeah.
For sure. Um, Coming back to what we were talking about earlier, when we were talking about Sargent and all that.
Hmm.
So, Sargent, I heard you say you very inspired by him, right? Is there any sort of other artists that you sort of take a lot of inspiration from, living or dead? Because we've got a lot of great living ones, like you were saying.
Yeah. I mean, I could go on and on and on
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
artists that inspire. I would say that mostly the artists that inspire me are my teachers at art school, and
Mm,
that sounds sort of silly, but I purposefully sought them out because I sort of anguished over where to go to art school, and I ended up going to a school that was only an hour away from where I grew up, simply because it had the artists that I truly admired the most: Henry Yan and Zhao Mingwu, and Kevin Weisty, who I was really lucky to learn from. All artists whose work I deeply, deeply admire and who inspire me every day. And a lot of artists who are unknown teach there, whose work pretty much nobody will know because they don't have websites or social media, even in this day and age.
mm,
They inspire me. Like I said, a lot of artists from Russia and from China, um, or who trained in Russia or China. Um, I'm trying to think. There's this artist, I think he lives in New York. I was talking about those multi-figure compositions. His name
Mm.
is Hong Nian, I think is how it's pronounced, Hong Nian Zhang. He's
Right.
such a brilliant, brilliant artist, and he does these enormous multi-figure compositions in these beautiful color schemes. I
Right.
just love his work, and um, of course, a lot of artists down in LA I really like as well,
Mm.
even though they have sort of a different ethos down there as
Mm.
compared to up in San Francisco. Um, but as far as like the dead artists, I would say mostly like early 20th century or
uh,
late 19th century.
mm.
Anything from before, with a few exceptions, is a little too mannered and stylistic. I think
Mm.
that era, around the time of the Impressionists, was really a golden age
Mm.
because they were highly naturalistic. Um,
Mm.
uh, and uh, just created beautiful, beautiful work that wasn't uh, overly religious or overly historical.
Mm.
It was more of everyday settings being treated with the same reverence as religious or historical painting was in the past.
Mm.
So people like Sargent, Sorolla, Zorn
Mm.
is a wonderful painter. Alphonse Mucha, probably my favorite of anyone from that time period.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I often hear pretty much whenever I hear American artists talking about the inspirations, it's always just about Sargent. I don't know what it is about you guys, but it's always Sargent, Sargent this, Sargent that. I'm like, there's
I
other
mean,
artists. You guys have had other artists, and you
yeah,
still do have other artists.
I like Sargent. I mean, I would
Yeah,
say that I my work is not really Sargent like.
yeah, right.
But they're definitely. I mean, you look at a lot of American artists, and you can clearly see the inspiration
Mm.
in the brushwork and the simplification of forms. I actually think Sargent, out of the three of Zorn and Sorolla, because they all painted very similarly, I think he's probably the least, like, not the least talented, but my least favorite of the three. I
Oh
tend
yeah.
to like Zorn the most.
Okay.
Um, but I mean, they're just, you look at their work and it's exceptional, right?
Yes.
There's basically flawless. So I think
Yeah.
that's why so many artists admire those artists, because they were realist, and yet they painted the impression. They weren't overly
Mm.
literal, and their brushwork was so bold, and that's
Mm.
what we really like nowadays. At least for
Mm.
me, I really appreciate bold brushwork and you know uh, not being ashamed to make a painting look like a painting
Mm.
or a drawing look like a drawing.
Yeah.
Not overly concerned with the surface quality or something, not making it look too realistic. Just, it's a drawing. I'm going to make it look
Mm.
like a drawing. I don't care. I'm not afraid to leave my marks on the page or on the canvas.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually something I hadn't heard until recently about people. Like, I don't want it to I don't want it to look like a painting. I'm like, what do you want it to look like then? It is a painting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of like academic art from that time period was highly polished. I mean, if
Mm.
you look at like
Yeah.
Bouguereau's work, who's I think the
Yeah.
most famous,
Oh yeah.
it, at least from a distance, it looks highly, highly polished. Now,
Mm.
I have seen Bouguereau's work in person, because they
Mm.
have I think one or two of his paintings at
Wow.
the Legion of Honor here in San Francisco,
Nice.
and it does not look as polished in person. But I
Mm.
think that goes for every painting, right? You get up
Right.
close enough and you can see the brushwork. No
100%.
painting looks 100% smooth up close
Yeah.
and far away. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I when I go to the galleries here, we have a lot of. Thankfully, the New South Wales gallery, it's like our biggest gallery, kind
Mm.
of that, and like our national gallery. Apart from those two, they're like the really big ones here in Australia. They have a lot of incredible work from a lot of like Australian artists and national artists, and so I'm really lucky to go see those when I can. It's only like 2 hours away, so I'm very fortunate in that respect. But yeah, exactly. When you get there, you've seen in the books. Like, I have books of artists that I've seen in person there, and I see them in books. And I'm like, oh, whoa, how are they doing this? But you see them in person, you look at it, you're like, oh, son of a bitch! I know exactly what. I know what's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and then on top of that, that energy that comes from seeing the work in person, even though like you've seen like seeing it in a book is I think is a little step up from the phone, at least a little bit,
Right.
because then
Yeah.
you know the colors are right. At least if you get a good book,
Hmm.
not the little coffee table ones. I've
Yeah.
seen some real shockers of those ones. I've seen some Van Gogh ones where they made like the sunflowers like instead of like this really nice yellow, they made them like these really hot orange, and I was like, nah, I don't remember seeing it like that. So yeah, obviously there's that discrepancy, but
Hmm.
seeing it from the book and then seeing it in real life, being able to get up and see it and then really inspect it, because again, our eyes see so much more than our cameras do. I'm not going to say ever can, because like I said,
Right.
technology's like going crazy.
Yeah.
But I see so much, and we've got two of them as opposed to one, and so that makes a huge difference as well.
Hmm.
Seeing like the perspective on something as well. I think that's why people sort of have that sort of gripe with photography versus life sort of painting sort of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
two sort of perspectives thing? Because that focal length, yeah, that focal length gets it's really weird. It can get really fish-eyed, and then you get really like
Yeah.
100 mil lens and flattens out everything. You're like whoa.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of work of people who are
mm,
clearly copying from a photo and they copy everything, including
mm,
the fisheye perspective from, their like phone camera or something. And it's like, well, our
yeah,
foot is not that big, you know, it's not the size of, from your head down to your chest. It's,
yeah,
so they're not really thinking about how the camera distorts things like
mm,
that. But yeah, seeing something in person is totally different. I do think that a photo is generally enough to study from. If you are
for
studying,
sure.
it's enough, especially if you have good detail shots, it's enough
Mm,
to do like master copy from or something. But
mm,
yeah, the first time I saw Zorn paintings in person, it was totally different than the little JPEGs I had saved on my computer. And I really worried the security guard, I think, because I was so close to the paintings and I was kind of
ah.
moving around trying to catch, because the museum lights are so bright that they
Oh,
they
yeah.
just they have glare. So I was
Yeah.
moving around really close to the painting and sketching, and I just kept having in the back of my mind that story about the woman who accidentally fell into the Picasso painting and,
Ah,
and
yes.
destroyed.
I forgot about
I
that.
mean, they fixed it, but like, you know, I took a step back after that. But yeah, it's a lot different seeing something in person. But for art students, I don't want people to feel like they need to go in
Mm,
person to see something, because I was still able to self-study,
mm.
even not having been to a museum. It just made
Yeah.
that first experience so much better, because I was finally able to say, oh, there is no magic trick, right? There's nothing magic that these people are doing. They're pretty sloppy with their brushwork too. It's just that
Yeah.
everything looks
Yeah.
nicer in a thumbnail.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like artist here, Tom Roberts. He's an Australian artist that I always admired growing up, and his work always looks so polished. But I was actually able to see it in person a year ago or something like that at our gallery, National Gallery, and I was like, "Whoa, it's still polished," but I'm like, wow, I can see like how he did that and how he followed the form with his brushwork and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole nother thing, and I like to talk about like the energy that a painting brings, and not only do our phones like separate us from like our family, our friends, and all that sort of stuff, and do all these freaky stuff with our minds. If you watch the social dilemma sort of stuff, and that what's it, the confirmation bias or whatever it is,
Right.
they only
Yeah.
show you what you want to see, or
Yeah.
they
Our
take you
little
down those rabbit
bubble.
hole type of things. Like the thing we was saying, yeah. Not only does a phone separate us from like life at a greater sort of understanding, but from a painting's perspective, that energy that you have when you're standing in front of the painting is totally gone, totally gone.
Yeah.
That separation is just something you cannot get unless you're really standing in front of it. Yeah. Um. Sorry, had my notes there.
Oh, that's okay.
Um. feel like that's a really nice place. I feel like that's a really nice place to sort of leave it. Is that
Mm-hmm.
that energy, of like an actual like peace
Mm-hmm.
person. And so whenever we have the opportunity, I always tell people go to actually see it. even if it's like oftentimes like I'll have a friend exhibiting and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, it's an hour's drive. I should go just because. But that the stepping outside and that the extra energy we kind of find ourselves going like, oh, is we got to travel. I can just look at it on my phone. It's always worth
Yeah.
it. It's always worth it to sort of go the extra step and see it for yourself in person, and not only to do that, but to paint from life as well is like something. If people haven't done that before, like you said, you can
Yeah.
see it in their paintings and stuff with the fisheye lens and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any sort of ending remarks or anything that you wanted to talk about as we sort of wrap up here?
Um, I can't think. I mean, I could talk endlessly about artwork and about its history and philosophy, but no, I think it was a very lovely conversation.
Thank you very much.
Like,
Thank you so much. And if people haven't seen your work, where can they find you? Just Instagram, or you got a website or something that they can look up?
they can find me on Instagram. That's my main repository of
Mm-hmm.
work. Um, and I am at Jacob Doodles, all one word, which
Yeah.
I mean, guess I should, my final remark should be explaining my ridiculously silly
Oh
name.
yes.
I did not think I was going to be a serious artist when I
Right.
made that.
Right.
So I had made that like when Instagram first came out, I think, and then I just decided to use it again when all those artists told me I should make an Instagram, and I should have changed it a long time ago, but I never did. So you can find me at Jacob Doodles, and it's not really doodles; it's just like my fine artwork that I post there. And I have a website where I post information about my classes, and you can sign up for my classes, which is marketstreetatelier.com.
Awesome.
And there's like a gallery of my work on there as well.
Nice. Can people sign up to your online classes on there as well, or do they just message you about those things as well? Like
They can sign up for my online classes on there. I still have a few spots left for
nice.
like private lessons as well. If I offer private tutoring to people. Again, that's sort of my thing is art teaching, and I'm not embarrassed to say that I'm a teaching artist. There's no shame in that. So if anyone wants to sign up to my classes, you can, but no pressure. You can just look at my work if you'd like.
100%. And I think the teaching thing is definitely nothing to knock. Art is such a beautiful thing, offers us so many gifts. We really should pass it on, honestly, to people that want to learn. It's something that should be passed on in an age that, like we were saying at the beginning, where everybody just thinks like things, you're born with it and that's it. Like, this is such a beautiful thing to pass on that anybody can learn through you or anything or any other avenue, right? It just does wonders for like your mental health and like just organizing. I find it like helps me clear my head and I can organize my life better, sort of things. But yeah, I think the teaching is probably the thing that human beings have done the longest, right?
Yeah.
That's why we still have cave paintings, the teachings, the stories. Like things weren't written down in books, but things were passed around by like just word of mouth. Like people remember that word of mouth for thousands upon thousands of years, and it's that community, it's that bond that teaching offers that we can pass on what we know to other people. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I love your work.
Thank you for having me.
Such a big fan. So really enjoyed the time here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you so much for making it to the end of the podcast. I really appreciate you guys. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. I enjoyed recording it. There's been a bit of hit and miss with uploading the podcast. I've been really busy taking care of my family, enjoying the Christmas period, doing lots of individual paintings for different people, working on different projects, stuff like that. So it's kind of been hit and miss uploading these podcasts. Know that I do have a bunch pre-recorded in the pipeline. All I have to do is edit them. So we're not waiting on guests. We do have a whole bunch pre-recorded. I just got to edit them. So know that they'll just be coming out as I edit them over the next couple of weeks. I think we've got maybe about 4 or so more to go that are pre-recorded, and I've got more coming down the pipeline along after those ones are done. So if you like this podcast, check out Jacob Hankinson or Jacob Doodles on Instagram. You can check out all their work there, as well as the podcast here. You can find us on Spotify, Living Masters on Spotify podcasts, as well as on Anchor, and as well as the video portion of this podcast here on YouTube, on my YouTube channel at Zach Hampson on YouTube. And so, yeah, hope you enjoyed this podcast, and I'll catch you all in the next one.